Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So this is going to be my Spellslinger Arcane Guide for the beta. So first off, standard disclaimer, this is beta. Things will change. In fact, they'll probably change within a week from now. So enjoy it while it lasts. Number two, we don't have sims for this. So this is going to just be based on my own findings, based on basically Feelycraft, right? We don't actually know how to play this, but I've been looking at logs, I've been talking with other players, and I also have over a decade of experience playing Mage. So I think I have a pretty good idea, or at least as good of an idea as you could have at this point, of which talents are good and how to play it. And you'll see that too represented in the actual performance here, because I'm showing you my damage basically in these raid bosses, so that you can see like how Arcane stacks up and just like how powerful it is. Obviously, tuning is just way out of control right now. This thing is going to get nerfed 100%. But I just want to show you how to play it so you can enjoy it while it lasts. And because I think it's actually really fun, like even if the numbers get adjusted down and some of the bugs are fixed, because there are some bugs, I think they're maybe a little overblown in terms of what people think is causing the damage. I think a lot of it's maybe just due to high tuning, but once they fix some of the bugs, both positive and negative, I think that this gameplay is going to be really, really solid, because Spellslinger just is super fun to play. Like you'll see in the background, I'm just constantly shooting out these arcane orbs, constantly firing arcane barrages. I mean, it really does feel like you're slinging those spells. All right, so this is going to be how your Spellslinger Arcane Mage looks in the War Within, and as you can see, we're going to get a ton of these little arcane splinters. Those things fly out, they give us resources, they do a ton of damage, and this opener has a ton of AoE burst. It's very, very strong right now, definitely overtuned. I think they're definitely going to tune this one down a bit. But as you can see, we're just sending out a ton of abilities. Arcane charges, you get those all the time with this. We also send out arcane orbs automatically. So a lot of this is passive, a lot of it's automatic, but it looks super flashy, really awesome, does a ton of damage in AoE and single target. But what we're going to do here is we're going to break down the rotation. I'm going to pause at certain intervals so I can explain my thought process and which ability is coming next. And then after we talk about the rotation, I'm going to give you a deep dive into the talents, the hero talents, mastery, arcane charges, etc. So you can hopefully understand the context here and get why the decisions are being made this way. And then we'll also talk about how you're supposed to play this if you don't run Siphon Storm as well, because that is an option. You do not have to run Evocation. So I want to start you off with just a quick explainer and also a sample of the rotation for Arcane. Consider this your TLDR. We're going to go into way, way further depth. So if anything in here doesn't make sense, just know that I will explain it later. I just want to give you just a quick understanding of this, okay? So Arcane has two resources. It's got mana and it's got arcane charges. You can have 4 charges, and your mana bar is obviously something you want to not run out of, but there are ways that we get mana back. So we want to generate charges, a lot of different ways to do that. This build will primarily do it through arcane missiles and arcane orb, but we can also generate them through arcane blast. This ability will deal 60% increased damage for each arcane charge. That's further increased with our mastery. It's also going to have a reduced cast time, and it's going to cost more mana. This is one of the main ways we spend our mana. Okay, and then we also have Arcane Orb, which we're going to be proccing all the time through Spellslinger. We also have talents that will proc it too, but this also gives us arcane charges. We have Arcane Explosion, which is an AoE ability. It's instant cast, but it will also generate a charge if it hits an enemy. And we have the way that we spend our arcane charges, which is Arcane Barrage. So Arcane Barrage will deal 30% increased damage per arcane charge, and then there's a ton of talents that also affect it, and also our mastery is going to further increase that. That's why it says 33% here on the tooltip. When it comes to our cooldowns, some of these are talents that we may not always pick, but the ones that we will always have are Arcane Surge and Touch of the Magi. Arcane Surge is going to spend all of our mana, and it's going to give us this crazy buff that basically fills up our mana instantly. It's also going to generate clear casting, and it's going to make us do a ton more damage. And we pretty much want to use this on cooldown. Touch of the Magi is a damage accumulator. We put it out on the target. It's going to instantly generate 4 arcane charges. It's going to gain damage as it's out. Think of it like you're charging it up as it's out, and then it's going to pop at the end. And there are other talents also that we want to use to make this deal increased damage and give us other opportunities while it's out. Evocation is a talent that we'll only really pick if we are spec'd into Siphon Storm, which is in a way kind of like a cooldown too. It's basically going to be like an int steroid. It also generates an arcane charge. We're always going to get a clear casting from it as well. But yeah, the idea with Evocation is we just want to pair this with our Arcane Surge. So every minute and a half, roughly, we're going to be using Evocation into Arcane Surge, into Touch of the Magi. And then between those intervals, we're also going to be using just Touch of the Magi on its own. Another cooldown we're going to be using is Shifting Power. This is cooldown reduction, and it's also going to generate splinters for us. We pretty much want to use Shifting Power as soon as we can outside of the Arcane Surge buff. Presence of Mind is just going to be instant Arcane Blast. You really don't have to use this talent at all, but it's nice for movement, and we have to take it if we go Siphon Storm anyways. Okay, so let's break down that opener you saw at the start of the video. So before the pull, I want to use Mirror Image just so I don't get threat. This will pause my threat essentially, and then I'm going to pre-evocation. This is obviously me playing Siphon Storm. So this evocation is going to do 3 different things. Number 1, it's going to give me clear casting. That's this pink parenthesis here. Number 2, it's going to give me 1 arcane charge. 1 of 4. I need to have 4 to go into my cooldowns. Number 3, it will also give me a buff. Siphon Storm will increase my int. So I'm going to have a lot more damage, and that's going to last for 20 seconds. So it'll be up for all my cooldowns. So as this evocation finishes, we are still before the boss has been pulled. So I'm going to precast an Arcane Blast. This is going to hit as the boss is being pulled. So once this Arcane Blast finishes, I'm going to have 2 arcane charges. I still need 2 more. All right, so let's break down that rotation you saw earlier. So before the pull, I want to use Mirror Image just so I don't get threat. I'm going to do a ton of burst. I don't want to pull the boss. And I'm also going to cast Evocation before the pull. This is obviously only if I'm playing Siphon Storm. Now, this Evocation is going to do 3 things for us. Number 1, it's going to give us a free clear casting. That's this parenthesis right here. Number 2, it's also going to give us an Arcane Charge. Number 3, it is also going to give us a buff. All right, we're going to have more int for 20 seconds, and that's going to stack with all of our other damage modifiers. So, yeah, we're just going to get a lot more burst out of this thing. Now, before the boss is pulled, I'm also going to precast an Arcane Blast right here. As this Arcane Blast finishes, normally what you would do is Arcane Orb. This would guarantee that you have 4 charges because I'm going to get 1 charge from the blast, 2 charges from the orb, and now I'm ready to send my cooldowns. However, if you do that on the War Within, you're actually missing out on a ton of value. Very, very bad to do this because we have a new talent called Magni's Spark, and it's going to duplicate the first Arcane Barrage that hits the target, okay? So this Arcane Blast is going to finish, and this missile, very likely that this is going to give me 2 arcane charges, but the other thing it's going to give me is 2 Nether Precision stacks, and there is actually more to it as well. So as this missile finishes, a couple things are happening, right? Arcane Debilitation on the target, target's taking more damage. Big Brain Buff, we have more int. Arcane Harmony, we're going to end up with 8 stacks of this, so that's going to be 5% more damage on our next Arcane Barrage per stack. Remember, it's duplicating the Arcane Barrage, so that's going to be double value. And then on top of that, we also don't have to spend the Arcane Orb, and using Arcane Orbs inside of our cooldowns is very, very good. We actually get double the value of Splinters out of Orb during Arcane Surge, so it's much better to use those Orbs inside of our cooldowns as opposed to before. So as this missile is finishing, I'm just praying that I reach 4 charges here. Each missile has a chance to proc it. Most of the time it does proc though. So as you can see here, it finishes, I get my 4th charge, and now we are ready to go. All systems go. So we're going to use our trinket, our potion, everything else we have, and we're going to start our Arcane Surge cast right here. So Arcane Surge is coming out, and as this Arcane Surge is finishing, I want to make sure I'm queuing up an Arcane Barrage. The Arcane Barrage will be sent from the Arcane Surge, and before it makes contact with the target dummy, I'm going to instantly press Touch of the Magi. So basically, there's going to be 3 things happening at the same time here. Arcane Surge will finish, Arcane Barrage will leave my hands, Touch of the Magi will be applied to the target. Touch of the Magi is off the GCD. It's instant. Okay, so I'm spamming the Arcane Barrage, and as soon as the Arcane Barrage goes off, I'm instantly pressing Touch of the Magi here. So here it happens. The Arcane Surge finishes. You notice how I have no charges here. Okay, in just a moment, you're going to notice that I now have 4 charges again because Touch of the Magi goes out. So the spell is in the air. Okay, Arcane Surge goes off. Touch of the Magi applies to the target. I have 4 charges now, and would you look at that? I have another precision for an Arcane Barrage here. Perfect setup, right? This is another benefit of doing the Arcane Missiles on the opener here is both the barrages are getting that 20% damage increase. So I'm going to send this barrage here since I've got 4 charges and 1 Nether Precision. Perfect situation. So we send that barrage, and then after this, I now have no Arcane Charges. I have no Nether Precision. So the obvious answer is I need to press Arcane Missiles. That's going to give me a chance at Arcane Charges, and it's also going to give me 2 Nether Precision buffs as well. So we send the Arcane Missiles right here. Now, I'm looking at the situation, and it's hard to react in real time because obviously I can't pause it whenever I'm actually playing. So at this moment, what I'm going to do is make a split decision. If I see I'm at 2 charges, I'm going to send an orb. If I see I'm at 3, then what I'm going to do is use an Arcane Blast into an Arcane Barrage. And if I end up with 4, I'm just going to press Arcane Barrage. Okay, so at this exact moment, I'm basically choosing between 3 options in real time. So as this finishes, I see I have 2. Okay, it's orb time. So we send the orb right here. That brings us to 4 charges, and now I have my Nether Precision ready. So right here, I'm going to send this barrage. This is going to have 4 arcane charges and my 2 Nether Precision buffs, so I'll get 20% more damage here, plus the 4 charges and everything else I have, plus Arcane Harmony, yada yada. So this barrage is going to hit, and then after that barrage, now I want to use my Arcane Orb, but I notice I get a 4-piece bonus proc here. So that's what this little pink square is. So what the 4-piece bonus is going to do for me is it's going to increase the damage on my next Arcane Barrage, and it's going to make that Arcane Barrage return 4 arcane charges to me. So what I want to do here is I want to get to 4 charges, and I want to send that barrage, and then I want to make sure I have Nether Precision up, because having Nether Precision up for every Arcane Barrage, if I can manage it, is really, really nice, right? If I end up with 4 charges and I don't have Nether Precision, usually I just send the barrage. But if I have the 4-piece bonus, it's going to be 20% on top of everything else, so it seems like it's more beneficial to have that Nether Precision buff. So right here, what I'm going to do is send the Arcane Orb. That brings me up to 4 charges. Now I have Nether Precision, and I have my Arcane Barrage buff up. I'm going to send this Arcane Barrage, and it will immediately return 4 charges. That's why you see the charges haven't changed here. Right here, I don't have a Nether Precision, but I do have 4 Arcane charges, so I'm just going to send this barrage right here. And then now I'm back to having 2 Arcane charges, no Nether Precision. So obviously, in this case, since I have the clear casting, I'm going to send my Arcane Missiles. But there is one thing that I need to make sure I do before this Touch of the Magi ends, which is I need to make sure I actually get 1 Arcane Blast in this thing. In order to proc the big hit at the end of Magni's Spark, I need to do 1 Arcane Blast. Also, the 1 Arcane Blast I send is going to duplicate damage, so it's generally better to have this thing be like a 3 or 4 charge Arcane Blast. So right here, I send the missiles like I was talking about. I do a POM Arcane Blast to make sure I get it in right there at the last second, because Touch of the Magi only has 3 seconds left. And then right here, I've got Nether Precision buff, 0 Arcane charges, but I don't have an Arcane Orb available. So what I do instead of casting another Arcane Blast at 0 charges, which would do basically no damage, I'm just going to opt to press Arcane Missiles. I've got 3 clear casting anyway, so why not? And that brings me up to the 4 charges I need, so now I can send that barrage again, and all of this is happening in the last 2 seconds of Touch of the Magi, so I'm getting a lot of extra value at the very end there. The barrage hits, boom, and then Touch of the Magi pops, and I still have a little bit of Arcane Surge left, so I'm just going to use a Arcane Missiles. I'm going to try to do 2 Arcane Blasts into an Arcane Barrage here, but I also have Shifting Power. Right here, Shifting Power. So once you do the Shifting Power, what you're going to do is go into kind of like a repeated rotation. It's always going to be kind of the same thing unless you get procs. So it's going to be an Arcane Missile into 2 Arcane Blasts, and then you're going to queue a barrage from that second cast. The reason why you want to do it this way is because it should basically guarantee that you always get 3 valuable spells off during that Nether Precision instead of 2, because it's 2 charges, but you get 3, right? Because you're queuing the Arcane Barrage from the Blast. Both of them benefit from Nether Precision there. So you see me use missiles here into double Arcane Blast. I did get a 4-piece buff here, so I'm going to go ahead and try to use this buff right now. Just sending the barrage on its own. But again, it's just missiles into double blast into barrage. Missiles into double blast into barrage. And what I'm paying attention to here is my Touch of the Magi cooldown. That is going to determine basically the cadence of this entire rotation, is Touch of the Magi. I want to make sure that I send all my cooldowns whenever I'm able to queue that Touch of the Magi from the Arcane Surge. It's very important that you don't offset these a little bit, because it's going to really, really mess you up. And it's also important that you get this Touch of the Magi off as soon as possible so that it lines up for your next Arcane Surge. Because you're lining up all of these cooldowns, right? The Evocation into the Arcane Surge, into the Barrage, Touch of the Magi. It's got to be like that every time. So right here, I have my Nether Precision buff, and I'm going to actually send this. So one thing I like to do, actually, is I like to get 2 Nether Precision buffs for Touch of the Magi, because if I do it that way, I can basically send back-to-back barrages with Nether Precision. So again, having a big Arcane Barrage at the start of your Touch of the Magi, it's pretty important because it's going to duplicate the damage. You want it to be as big as possible here. So I'm going to send this missiles here, and then now I have 4 Arcane charges. So I'm going to Barrage, and from this Barrage, I'm going to Touch of the Magi. That applies right now. It gives me the 4 charges, and now I'm going to barrage again. Okay? And I get a 4-piece proc here. So this is actually the perfect situation, because if I use this Arcane Missiles, I should get 2 stacks of Nether Precision, and I'll be able to get the amped up Arcane Barrage on that first one, and then send another one because it's going to return 4 charges, just like Touch of the Magi would. So I'm going to Arcane Missiles here. And I ended up getting a little unlucky here because I didn't get a second charge. So what I do instead of what I normally do, which would just be barrage again, I'm actually going to send an Arcane Blast here. I noticed at the very last second I got this one. There's travel time on missiles, right? So the charges don't happen instantly. Sometimes you can't anticipate that this is going to happen, right? So I'm just going to go for it. I'm already casting the spell. Might as well finish the spell. So I'm going to Arcane Blast here into a barrage. That does, unfortunately, use both of my Nether Precision buffs. And now I have 4 charges, so I decided to just send that barrage on its own. Okay, a little value lost there, but what can you do, right? It's really hard to react in time when stuff like this happens. Staying on the target, though, is bad because then you can't really make use of the travel time for a barrage to put up Touch of the Magi in time. So, you know, it's kind of like you're between a rock and a hard place. Sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. Anyways, so Touch of the Magi is still up, and I've already gotten all of the spells I need to off in it. So I'm just casting basically missiles into double blast into barrage, right? That same rotation. And that's going to be what I continue to do here until Touch of the Magi is up again. So as you can see here, I'm just paying attention to the cooldown of my Touch of the Magi. It's the same rotation over and over again. Missiles, double blast, barrage. The only thing that will upset this is if I have a 4-piece bonus or if I'm sitting on 2 charges of Arcane Orb, because I don't want to be sitting on 2 charges of Arcane Orb if I can help it. All right, and that's a good stopping point for the rotation. Let's talk about the talents. To understand Spellslinger Arcane, you first have to understand what the Arcane Splinters are doing and how they work. So we generate Arcane Splinters through a couple different ways. Splintering Sorcery means that whenever we consume our Nether Precision, this is the buff we get from consuming Clearcast. It's the 20% more damage on Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage with 2 stacks. Whenever we consume that, we're going to conjure 2 Arcane Splinters. They're going to fire at the target. They're going to embed themselves in there, and this does stack. It just deals damage over time. We also have Augury of Bounds. Whenever we cast our cooldown Arcane Surge, we're going to automatically conjure 8 of these Splinters. And while the buff is up from our Arcane Surge, we're going to generate twice as many Splinters. We also have Splintering Orbs. So whenever we damage an enemy with Arcane Orb, whenever it hits its first target, that's going to conjure 4 Arcane Splinters for free. So it'll take 2 orbs to reach 8 for this. And also, this is going to increase our orb damage. And then Shifting Power is also going to fire a barrage of 8 Arcane Splinters at random enemies. It's not your main target. It's just all over the place. Anything you're in combat with within 40 yards is going to get hit by this. And then we also have Splinter Storm. So whenever we have 8 or more Splinters out, it will automatically trigger this spell. So we don't have to cast this ourselves. It just automatically goes out. But what's going to happen is it's going to shatter all the Splinters. It's going to deal all their remaining damage. And then it's going to basically set up like a barrage of Splinters above your character that all fire out at once. They don't embed themselves in the target again. It just deals damage. But it looks really cool. And it does have a chance to grant us clear casting. So we get a lot of clear casting as this build. Now, you notice in the background, I'm just constantly shooting out Arcane Orbs. And the reason for that is because any direct damage from the Splinters is going to have a chance to launch an orb. And it's also going to increase the damage that Arcane Orb deals. So remember, we have all of these different ways that we are generating Splinters, including Orb itself. And then once we do the direct damage, there's just a very small chance of them proccing Orb. Once we reach 8, it's going to do the Splinter Storm. But these are all different ways that we are going to essentially be doing direct damage with the Arcane Splinters. Now, we also have 2 other talents that are going to make our Splinters AoE. First is Controlled Instincts. Whenever we strike an enemy with the Orb, for 8 seconds, they're going to have their Arcane Splinters deal damage around them. So there's definitely a benefit to having the targets constantly getting hit by the orbs, right? We want to keep this buff as much as possible. Whether it's through the Spellfrost Teaching one, where it's automatically procced, or whether it's like us casting the orb ourselves. We also have Volatile Magic. So whenever a Splinter is removed, it explodes and it deals damage to nearby targets. Both of these, by the way, are going to have damage reduced above 5 targets. So it isn't completely uncapped, but it actually does some pretty decent damage. And then we have some choice notes in here. I'm not really going to talk too much about the other 2 choice notes because these are just utility. Okay, so now that we have discussed the spell Splinters with Spellslinger, let's discuss Arcane itself, and there are things that have changed. So the Mastery for Arcane is Savant. This gives us mana regen. It also gives us increased damage with our Arcane charges. And this is something where I think you typically only want to pick Mastery if it ends up being like a problem with your mana, like you just don't have enough mana. I feel like you would fill in with Mastery to try and fix that. I really haven't had any mana issues. We spend so many barrages that I feel like mana is just a non-issue. Also, if you go TA, you just have a ton of extra mana regen. So yeah, I don't think we really want too much Mastery, but again, it's hard to say with stats because it's all Feely Craft right now. I'm just running Haste Crit as Arcane, which is awesome because Haste is definitely the best for Fire too. Okay, so since Arcane charges were mentioned, let's quickly explain those. So you'll notice on my UI, I have like these 4 lines that you'll see down here. These are Arcane charges. So that's going to increase the damage on my Arcane Blast and my Arcane Barrage. Essentially, you generate them in 2 main ways as this build, although there are a ton of other ways to generate them. So the first way is through high voltage. This makes it so whenever we press Arcane Missiles, we just will generate charges like crazy, just passively. And then we also generate them with Arcane Orb. You'll see the tooltip here. Grants 1 Arcane charge when cast and 1 every time it deals damage. So if you remember, whenever we talked about the Spellslinger talents, we also had like this one right here where we just shoot out random orbs. Yeah, this just gives us like a ton of arcane charges. And orb in general is just like a really great spell. And again, it gives us splinters. So yeah, we love that. We love that. The charges themselves also interact in other ways. So we have this talent up here, Arcane Cleave. Whenever we have charges and we spend them on Arcane Barrage, they're going to hit additional enemies. This talent is not something you'd want in pure single target, but if there's any sort of cleave, you definitely want this talent. If you're going like pure single target, I'll definitely swap it out here for Consortium Bauble. This is just going to be more damage on your blast and slightly reduced cost. But anyways, I think Arcane Cleave is definitely worth it if there's like 2 targets ever. So I would say this is like the default talent. I don't think you're really giving too much up putting this one in. Also, whenever we consume charges, we're also going to get a haste buff that stacks. And Arcane Tempo should pretty much be up the whole time. And then Resonance. So we actually have Funnel as Arcane Mages. But Arcane Barrage is just a really hard-hitting spell because we have a lot of talents that are giving it extra damage and a lot of other reasons why it's just great. Arcane Bombardment is Execute. Whenever a target is below 35% health and they take damage from Arcane Barrage, that damage is going to be doubled. So if we have one target that's an Execute and we are hitting it with Arcane Barrage, it is going to take double damage. The other ones won't unless they're also an Execute. But I mean, this is just crazy because your funnel is essentially doubled, right? The funnel from Resonance, whenever a target's an Execute, you're going to get double the value there. And this significantly increases the value of Arcane Barrage. Just, it does a ton more damage, and it's already so valuable as a spell. We also have Orb Barrage, so whenever we use Arcane Barrage, we have a chance to just launch an orb that's going to deal additional damage. And as you already know, we just have a ton of orbs that we're already shooting out, and the value of orbs is really high because we get 4 splinters each. And it also increases the damage the enemies take. So yeah, shooting out more orbs is great. In AoE, sometimes you'll notice me just getting lucky with my procs. And I'm literally just spamming Arcane Barrage over and over and over again into mobs that are in execute range. And the orbs are flying out every time. I think the best one I had was like 15 Arcane Barrages in a row. And the targets were below 35%. And I pulled aggro and I died, even though the enemies were in execute. So yeah, I mean, just crazy talent here, right? And then other ways we get damage on Arcane Barrage are Arcane Harmony. So every time we have a missile deal damage, it's going to increase the damage on our next barrage. And this is for all of them. So we're using a lot of missiles, right? Missiles are how we spend clear casting to get the nether precision. And it's just giving us a ton more damage on those Arcane Barrages. Also, obviously, we want to be using a lot of missiles for high voltage. High voltage is, again, how we get our arcane charges, or at least one of the ways. So whenever a target takes damage from Arcane Missile, it's also going to increase the damage that they take from Missiles, Barrage, and Blast. This actually can stack really, really high. The highest I've ever seen this stack was about 30. So 30% more damage. So just another way that Arcane Barrage can get more damage there. So yeah, those are the big things for Arcane Barrage. When it comes to optional talents, so I'm running Siphon Storm. I don't think Presence of Mind is really that great, but Evocation with Siphon Storm is nice because it's a really good way to start your pull. I think this is a pretty good talent if you're primarily going for single target. But the problem with Siphon Storm is that the actual Siphon Storm talent, which you're spending 3 talents to get, by the way, is below the capstone line. So what this essentially forces us to do is not take Aether Attunement. And this talent seems to be bugged when it comes to the damage, but it does still work with the cleave, as far as I can tell. So, yeah, the main thing that you're choosing is between these two. So if you want to run Aether Attunement, if there's like a bit of cleave, there's really no point in running Evocation and Presence of Mind then. So you can then move those talents somewhere else. So usually what I do is I'll just pick up whatever is calling out to me. Maybe it's Reverberate if I ever feel like I'm pressing Arcane Explosion. Maybe it's just more damage on orbs. Maybe it's more damage with clear casting. It could even be like your familiar deals more damage. Honestly, like the options here aren't too great. The biggest issue is that there are talents we want to get. Like we would love to be able to get Lay Sight, which is just more nether precision damage. We would love to be able to get Lay Drinker. Consuming nether precision has a chance to make our next spell Echo deal additional damage. And nearby enemies, right? These are both really cool talents. The problem is we can't get them. They're out of reach because it takes 2 points to get down the left side of the capstone area. We have to also put 2 points into Prodigious Savant to go down this side. And we have to waste talents above the capstone layer just to get down here. Stuff like 5% more arcane missile damage, right? This is just like a boring talent. It's not good. We take a lot of boring stuff up here. It's just very low damage just so we can path down the tree. And the bottom, the capstone layer is super, super bottom heavy. The top has a lot of filler. So that's what I hope they address, and they keep redoing this tree like every week, so maybe they'll look into this. But the biggest thing is just having these be 2 points. Having so many of the important talents be down at the bottom level, it feels a little bad. It would be really cool if some of these great talents were maybe moved up just a little bit so we'd have more access to the other cool stuff. But anyways, that is it for the Arcane talents. All right, so there is more to Arcane, but this video is getting kind of long, so I'm just going to summarize this with some quick tips and tricks for you. So number one is Arcane Explosion is great for just getting one Arcane charge if you have no charges available and no missiles. It's also great to use if you want to kind of speedrun your Arcane charges. This is primarily useful if the target's below 35%. So remember, whenever a target's in execute range, if you get those barrages out, they deal double damage. It is a huge amount of damage. So yeah, getting as many barrages out as you can whenever the target's in execute, big value there. Also, whenever you're in your cooldowns, like you have Arcane Surge up, I feel like it's actually kind of an increase to kind of cancel your Arcane missiles. In general, you want to make sure you have the 4 charges. So as soon as you have the 4 charge, you can interrupt your missile for the barrage. You can also do this with Arcane Blast if you want, although I will say, I feel like it's actually better now to just try to have your Touch of the Magi during Arcane Surge just be all missiles and barrage, except for like the one Arcane Blast to proc Magni's Spark. And then other things you can do. So obviously you can run without evocation, right? We talked about that earlier. If you are running the Aether Attunement talent, that thing cleaves your missiles. So whenever you're in AoE, I would recommend that you probably just press like Arcane Explosion to use your clear castings and then just try and send as many barrages as possible. But if you get the Aether Attunement buff, you should definitely send the Arcane Missile instead. Not too sure on when to Arcane Explosion versus Missile. It's really hard to know right now, right, without sims, so you can just feel it out. But it definitely feels like in AoE, if you can just prioritize getting as many Arcane charges and as many barrages out as possible, while also making sure you make use of the Aether Attunement buff, while also prioritizing barrage whenever a target is low, just trying to get through as many charges as possible seems to be the right answer, while also not munching too many nether precision buffs. All right, and that is everything I've figured out so far. So if you have some ideas or tips and tricks, be sure to include those in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like. These things take a lot of time to put together, so I do appreciate that. And if you want to see more of my content, I have a lot more guides and other content coming out soon. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.